All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to today's webcast. I'm Dr. Sheila Segerson, your moderator. I'm also a veterinary behaviorist. Thank you for joining us for the second in our two-part series about one of the most vulnerable populations in animal shelters, healthy, medium, and large dogs who are declining. If you missed part one, don't worry, you can view it on demand. Just visit our webcast page at maddiesfund.org and search for Lifesaving Protocol for at-risk dogs. Today we'll go more into the challenges of saving medium to large shelter dogs. We'll be devoting the majority of this session to answering your questions about this important topic. Joining me is Kristen Hassen, the Director of Animal Services at Pima Animal Care Center in Tucson, Arizona. Every year, PAC takes in 17,000 homeless, lost, and abandoned pets. In addition to that, they serve 15,000 more animals through animal protection and outreach services. A huge program, and under Kristen's direction, PAC is saving more than 90% of the cats and dogs who come to the shelter. Additionally, Sara Aguilar, the Deputy Director at Pima Animal Care Center, is also here. Sara was previously the first foster coordinator at Ventura County Animal Services, sending over 3,000 pets to foster in just 1 year. I also have to mention that it is Sara's birthday today, and I hope everyone can join me in wishing Sara happy. Kristen and Sara are both experts at finding new ways of thinking about and acting on practical life-saving initiatives. Welcome, Kristen and Sara.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Hey, everybody. It's great to be back with you again today. Hopefully you got to tune in yesterday. I was so nervous because it's such an important topic. It's such a challenge for so many of us, and there's truly like 10 hours of information to share. So yesterday we hit hard with information and tried to arm you with as many resources as we could to help you, and today is all about you. So we're going to share a few things with you, but most of the time today is actually going to be dedicated to answering your questions. Sara is my right hand and is here with me today because she actually is the one overseeing most of the life and death decisions on a daily basis for our dogs, and she's the one that helps move them through the shelter system. So we're here today to help. Two goals for you. One is we can get just about any organization to a 90% save rate for dogs without creating capacity issues and without increasing your length of stay. So we can talk about that. And second, we're all dealing with dogs that have some negative history, and we all know that not all of them need to be euthanized for behavior, but in a lot of shelters, that's still what's happening. So we're going to talk about how to save more of those dogs. Here's kind of the basics we covered in case one slide on what we did yesterday, and this is just the basics, but we talked about how to get to the 90% save rate, and that's noses in, noses out, no animals counted out for really any shelter, and how to save more lives without increasing your length of stay, how not being overcrowded. People worry that if we save more lives, we're suddenly going to not have space or not provide adequate care. It's just not true. Third, we talked about how to make standardized decisions around life and death. So instead of just saying, having blanket restrictions, dog did X, dog is always going to die, treating every animal as an individual and taking a case management approach to those decisions. Fourth, how to give almost every dog in your care a fair chance at a live outcome, even dogs that do have some challenges. And lastly, the crucial, absolutely essential role of volunteers and fosters who are at the heart of our life-saving success. And in most every organization that is saving this number of dogs, that volunteers and fosters play a central role. So that's Sara. I'll let her introduce herself. I'm Kristen. I talked a little bit yesterday, but been doing this work trying to save big dogs in shelters for nearly the last decade. It is the hardest part of our jobs. I always say that I could not even come to work and all the little dogs and cats would find their way out. We have really robust community cat programs here, and our little dogs fly out the door, but medium and large dogs, we still really struggle with. And that's not really about the dogs. It's more about housing restrictions and breed-specific rules and biases, and how hard it can be to live with a medium and large dog in a urbanized urban community where people are living closely together, and you may face housing restrictions. So it's not really about the dogs, but they're our biggest challenge. And over the last eight years, we've learned a lot of lessons, and we've made a lot of mistakes along the way. And so we're just here to share that knowledge with you.
I think the one thing that I just want to say is I've been involved in saving big dogs from a variety of angles, from fostering and from working in private nonprofit rescues, being a foster coordinator, and now being a deputy director. I've pled to save dogs when people thought that euthanasia was the right decision. I've been successful at that sometimes. I've been unsuccessful. I think we're all trying to figure this out, and hopefully some of what we talk about today can help you.
So in that picture, you see that is also my medium or large challenging dog. And so we come at this from the perspective also of owning dogs that are more challenging, and have a lot of empathy for people that do make that choice to try to help a dog with some behavioral challenges. My partner and I have definitely done a lot in terms of the dogs that we own. And so we get it for those of you who are looking at it from that end. Okay, so today is dedicated to our critics, the people that say, no way, this is impossible, you shouldn't even be trying. Our goal today is that some of our critics can watch and listen and ask hard questions, and that we can help convince them that there's a different way to look at this. So what do our critics say? They say that shelters that are trying to save more lives are warehousing dogs, that they're just keeping them in kennels and leaving them there and not placing them. They say that this quote, some people call them, quote, marginal dogs. Nobody really knows what that means. It can be anything from a dog that looks at you funny to a dog with bite history. That these, quote, marginal dogs should not even be considered for placement. We shouldn't even be trying because they're too hard. They're going to go home and they're not perfect. And adopters don't really want those dogs. And if they do, they're not really prepared to take them home. So basically the best public service, say the critics, is euthanizing these dogs. Critics also say that shelters aren't really transparent about the dog's history, so they're sending harder dogs medically or behaviorally home to people and not telling them about the dog's histories. And they claim that shelters and rescues don't follow up or track data about the dogs over time, and that there's no way to have both community safety, quote, public safety, and have life-saving. You're gonna always make a choice. And if you save more lives, you're not gonna have public safety. So that's what the critics say. And it would be easy to write them off and to just call them naysayers, but they're not wrong. Sometimes when we are trying to save lives, particularly in shelters with resource challenges, lots of animals. I think about my friends in places like Detroit where they have a teeny tiny budget trying to save dogs. They just started doing adoptions in 2018. And big cities like Austin or El Paso or even here in Pima, we have a lot of animals, and so it's not easy. So we agree with the critics that shelters need to move faster to move dogs. These dogs do not move themselves through the system, and we have to do more to get them out. We also recognize that some dogs just aren't safe to place, and that doesn't mean that that will always be true. But right now in our movement, we don't have great networks and shelter sanctuaries where dogs can receive long-term rehabilitation in a humane setting. Those are hard to come by, and that may not always be true, but we recognize we may not have safe outcome placements. And yesterday I shared this in the presentation, but this is our binder, and these are all forms of dogs we've actually euthanized for behavior because we didn't have safe outcome options. We need to build better support networks for dogs. It's sort of like how we have for kids. We have schools and places for them to learn and get extra help if they need it. And we need to do the same thing for our pets. We're all going around saying pets are family and pets are the new kids. We need to build the support networks that will support those relationships. We owe it to our adopters and our fosters to tell them everything that we know about the pets that they're getting. It is our obligation. We need to tell them both in writing and verbally any known history about any of the dogs that we're adopting or fostering. We owe it to them so that they can go into any adoption or foster with their eyes wide open. And we also need to follow up and provide resources for them. There's plenty of ways to check in with fosters and adopters. You can even invite them to come back and have their dogs participate in play groups or some of your canine fun classes or training classes. And we need to track data on bites and long-term outcomes. So one of the things that we do here is we're not just looking at life-saving, we're also looking at bites in the community and bites in the shelter. And what we found is that as euthanasia goes down, so do the bites in our community. We're actually creating a safer community because we're helping people be better pet owners by offering them a lot of support. So we need to track those so that we know if our programs are successful and we know if we're running into some challenges. This is the picture that you see in front of you is a binder of our long stay dogs, and those binders are sitting on every adoption table. And we invite our visitors who come in to meet one of our long stay dogs. And more, it's been really exciting. We're getting people coming in the door saying, we want to meet your longest stay dog. So right now at PAC, we take in 1,000 dogs a month, and we only have 3 dogs with lengths of stay over 90 days. And it's really because we're very focused on keeping that length of stay short and moving them at least into foster quickly. Okay, so we have a challenge. This problem of animal welfare is not going anywhere, so we have 2 ways to move forward. If you're working in animal welfare right now, you have heard this old, tired argument raising its head once again, that the only solution to the challenges of saving big dogs is not to save them, to euthanize more of them, that they are somehow unadoptable or undesirable, and that we should only be saving the cream of the crop, the dogs with no medical or behavioral challenges, and that, in fact, it's our responsibility of shelters to euthanize a certain number of the population. And that number is often pretty big, according to people who make this argument. That is nothing new. Even though it takes on new forms, it's an old argument, and it's one that we don't believe is true, and many shelters around the country have proved isn't. So our goal, option number 2, is to help shelters do their jobs better. Yes, saving more medium and large dogs is going to be challenging. It is not always going to be easy. You are going to have days when you're at capacity, but death doesn't have to be the answer to that problem. We are an incredibly innovative, motivated group of lifesavers, and we believe we can do better. And the day we stop trying is the day we need to go find another job. The future is going to be more dogs with more known histories, both good and bad, coming into our shelters. This is a logical thing to happen because we're telling the community we want to help. We're telling them, share your stories about your pets. We're telling them that we're no longer the dog pounds. The community's coming to us believing that we're going to try to save their pet, and so they're being more honest with them. If we're asking them to tell us more about their pet, we're going to get more information. That means we're going to have more dogs with some known negative history on their records, and just killing all of those dogs is not the solution, and it's not going to solve the problem. But we have some ways that are going to help start to solve that problem for you. So I will turn it over to Sara now.
We're going to jam through a bunch of stuff. Hopefully it helps you. How many of you remember this scene from the original Willy Wonka where Veruca Salt steps up on this egg decatur, and she's deemed a bad egg? For a lot of dogs that are coming into shelters, the behaviors and interactions during the intake process or even before they come into us mark whether they're good or bad, and those results really end up in a life or death decision. But as Kristen was saying earlier, as we increase the trust with our community, as we spend more time learning about these pets, we have to process more layers of personality, and we have to look at other factors that influence behavior. No longer are there just blanket bad dogs. We can no longer use just terms like aggressive and friendly and be black and white. There's a couple cases that I'm going to go through with you real fast that just sort of show how complex this can be. So the first dog here, this is Trigger. He came to us after his owner was arrested. He was growling at neighbors. They couldn't get him. Officers needed to use a catch pole to bring him in. Once he was here, he was super barrier reactive at the shelter gate. But then once we got him out, he was doing zoomies in the yard. He was just turned into this goofy lap dog, and he really was a great office companion. He ended up being adopted. The next dog we're going to look at is Callie. Callie's there on the left. She was really leash reactive and redirecting on her handlers. People thought that she was dog aggressive. She got into a fight at a dog park. But we successfully introduced her to dogs of all sizes, small dogs and big dogs. She's seen here with her two foster brothers. She loves playing fetch. She also was adopted. This is Stormy. Stormy didn't come to us with a lot of bad history, but Stormy developed bad history in the shelter. The environment itself was so stressful for him. He was injuring himself. He bit a volunteer. We were able to get him out of the shelter, and he kind of reverted back to this good dog that he loved spooning with his foster mom. He got along great with the pets in the home. He ended up having like BFF experiences with a cat. He turned out just to be a great dog. Optimo is this little shorty on the left. Optimo ended up being a volunteer favorite, but displayed this behavior in the shelter that where being housed in the shelter was potentially dangerous, being very reactive, snapping at people. But outside of the shelter was playgroup rock star, got along great with other dogs, loved going hiking, meeting people and dogs on the trail. They're just very complex. There is no black and white. Kuyo was this guy in the front here. Kuyo was in the shelter for a long time. This was a dog from Ventura where he was in the shelter for about a year. Was super disconnected from people, was leash reactive to other dogs, but again, had these also amazing notes where he loved car rides, did really well out in public on day trips and patios, meeting other people, meeting dogs, was a playgroup rock star, ended up being adopted. So even this dog here, this is Kanai. Even with Kanai, that's a complex personality. So Kanai had previously killed a cat and a puppy, was really reactive on leash, but then on the positive side, ended up living with another dog. They reported that he's great with kids in the home, but ultimately we ended up making a decision to euthanize this dog. Not all of the dogs are 100% bad or good. That's, as Kristen mentioned yesterday, and I think again today, about 1 of every 5 to 10 dogs is unsafe to put out in the community.
One of every 5 to 10 that we're considering for euthanasia.
We're considering. That's the important part. But every dog has observable, recordable, good and bad behaviors. So anytime that we create a blanket black and white rule, we're just eliminating options for these dogs. And if your choices are to either kill more or get better, then we have to get better at creating protocols and processes for making decisions. So where do we start at?
That's one of our long stay dogs. I just want to give a pitch to this idea because it's so awesome. Well, our adoption coordinator, she took the 5 longest stay dogs and like outrageously decorated their kennels. 3 of them in 2 days out the door. It worked like magic in a shelter where we have 522 kennels. This got those dogs out so quickly. So steal this, do it. It will help you immediately.
Okay, so if you think about all the ways that dogs can enter the shelter and the pathways that they take through the shelter and all the different options for outcomes, and they're sort of messy. There is no straight path through the shelter. It could be as simple as from intake to the adoption floor to adoption, or it can be really complex where they come in from the field, they're in the clinic, maybe they're in isolation, then they go to the floor, then they go to foster, then they come back. It just gets really messy. So all of these points of contact with dogs, we need to be capturing this information. So by recording objective notes at every touch point, we really can paint a fuller picture of a dog's full personality. We tend to find that staff and volunteers only record really bad notes, or if a dog is being considered, it's urgent or it's being considered for euthanasia, all the good notes seem to show up all of a sudden. So it's really important that everybody knows that you need to record notes from the time that an animal enters your care to the time it leaves. Doing daily rounds is extremely important. We assign representatives from different teams to get together every day, and they walk through and they look at ways to kind of unclog those paths and move dogs through to the next step. Does a dog need a little bit of training because it needs a better kennel presence? Does it need better signage? Does it need some work on reactivity? Does it need handling tools?
Does it need a foster? I mean, I think we do very, very limited in-shelter behavior modification because it doesn't really work, particularly in a high-volume shelter. So mostly what they're looking for on rounds 2 with behavioral decline is how do we get it the heck out even for a couple of hours?
So empower the people that are participating to find those opportunities and to do something about it. If you're not using tools like easy walk harnesses and gentle leaders in your shelter, start doing that right away. They're easy to use tools and they can improve the safety in your facility, the handleability of some of these stronger dogs, and just make them really easily accessible for everyone and train people how to use them. Another thing that we have here is behavior standing orders. So these are some basic steps for our staff and volunteers on how to handle specific behaviors like jumpy, mouthy behavior, so that dog walkers and handlers aren't inadvertently encouraging unsafe behavior. Giving them the ways to deal with behaviors, making the protocols easy to find and easy to read, super important. Another thing that's really great with volunteers, as Kristen was saying, we have to have them, is to empower them through creating focus groups and allowing champions. So for us, we have focus groups which volunteers that focus on specific groups of shelter dogs or specific processes. So they teach basic commands, or they work on pack walks to reduce reactivity thresholds. They focus on seniors, whatever your largest needs are in your shelter, and then allowing them to be advocates for these dogs, to do marketing, to answer questions, to meet potential adopters, to really get to know them and act in a way to help a specific dog or group of dogs move through.
I think, Sara, I was counting the other day, and I think at our shelter we have about 35 Facebook groups, and 33 of those are managed by volunteers, and most of them are targeted to certain needs in certain groups of pets, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's Top Dog with some of the challenging pets that need some training. We have Mature Mutts, deals with seniors. Being able, I think sometimes looking at 400 dogs is really overwhelming. And so being able to kind of focus in allows people to really make an impact and a difference with a specific group. So we talk about length of stay. The first thing is you have to know what yours is. So we track our length of stay, and we have an audio-generated report that comes out every Monday. It goes to staff and volunteers that indicate all of the animals that have been here more than 30 days. Here, our length of stay is just about 11 days. And anytime that dogs are over that, they start to get extra attention. So this checklist here is some basics. It is all volunteer-based. And we kind of started with a checklist that Jacksonville Humane Society had created, a long-stay task force. And we brought it to our volunteers and met with them and talked about what works for us here at PEMA. What can we use? What's going to be the most useful in our community? What can our volunteers do? And allowed our volunteers to help create this specific checklist. And it goes on every kennel. And this is one of the files that's included that you'll get access to. As dogs are here longer, this becomes increasingly more individualized. So doing a one dog adoption event is only going to help one dog, but you might bring in other people that are interested in helping other long-stay pets. Really with this, the sky's the limit. The more creative you can be, the more likely you are to have success.
And so we're really focused on length of stay, and we talk about it all the time. A length of stay is never a reason to euthanize a dog because it's been there a long time. We hear this like, oh, it's been here a long time, nobody wants it. That is not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is that if you can focus on length of stay for most dogs, there's an amazing benefit that no one talks about, which is that you now have room to help the dogs that actually need you, and you have the time to do it. So when we're talking about length of stay related to saving your harder dogs, we're doing that intentionally, because if you can get more of your dogs moved and those hidden gems, those like, I'm here for 6 months for no good reason, get them out faster. You have so much more time to focus on your actually challenging dogs. So that's why the emphasis on moving more dogs more quickly.
This is a picture of a whiteboard from Ventura. We use one here also. And this is posted where volunteers and staff can read it, and it's used to communicate dogs that have behavior before it's a problem. This is not a euthanasia list. It's not a pre-euthanasia list, but it's to identify ways that people can step in to prevent these dogs from further declining behavior, ways that you can help get them out or help change this behavior. So the really important thing to have on here is it's very specific. What is the observed behavior? How can it be helped? And there's a place for people to sign up and say, I'm committing to doing this. I'm committing to working with this behavior, or I'm committing to making this video. And then there's space for additional information. Once a dog does have a deadline, you do a couple different things to communicate that out. The first one is an email to our rescue partners, and you see that here. This is a little bit more marketing. Our rescue partners know that they can contact us for full information. If you can automate this email, it's even better because it's just that much faster. We also send an email to staff and volunteers who opt in for notifications, and we give them every single note that we have. We give them all of the animal memos. We give them bite activity memos, field activity memos, anything that we have, we provide. We do redact it so that personal information is kept out. But the important piece about making sure that volunteers have all of this information is that volunteers tend to be the ones networking for these dogs. They're garnering pledges for training, they're finding rescues, they're finding fosters. And if they don't have all of that information, you can get a commitment that's going to fall through. They have to know what they're working with. They have to have access to all of this. And it's part of our commitment to being transparent, not just to staff and volunteers, but to our community.
When we issue a deadline, it's usually for a very specific reason. And it's either because we don't feel like we can adequately and safely handle the dog in the shelter, or the dog has done committed an act of harm against a person or animal. So we may issue a deadline, but if the volunteers come up with an option in the initial 7-day period, we extend that deadline. So it's not just a one-way communication street of this is the deadline, dog's going to die on day 7. It's really the beginning of a communication process that we work with the volunteers. And sometimes that means we have emergency meetings. Sometimes it means we stay till 6 at night, but we're partnering with the volunteers, and the volunteers will tell you this is tremendously challenging. I think it is the hardest part of their work. They want to do it, but we are constantly in communication how to do it better.
Once a euthanasia decision has been made, there are times when we do an immediately go forward with the process and we don't notify volunteers. But whenever possible, we do try to do a 72-hour notice, and we do give volunteers an opportunity to say that they would like to be present. There's a lot of conversation, and it's really, like almost everything, is kind of a case-by-case basis. But a lot of times our volunteers are the ones that know these dogs the best and spent time with them, and it's really important to give them that opportunity to have closure.
So in this situation, it was a dog that we got the notes after the dog had entered the shelter, became aware of the history, and determined we didn't feel safe placing that dog. So this is not a dog we would issue a deadline on. This is a dog we simply made the decision to euthanize it, but we let the volunteers and people who would want to know, we let them know, just to make them aware it's part of our commitment to transparency to them.
So like Kristen was saying, this is an ongoing process. We didn't just make these processes and say this is what we're doing. We meet with volunteers at least once a month, and we meet with the specific volunteers that have opted in to work with these at-risk and urgent dogs. Depending on what's going on, about every other month. We request their feedback, we listen to it, we allow them to come up with solutions and ideas, and we encourage it. One of the challenges that we came across is that there was a team of staff that they were asking questions of, and staff was kind of like, oh, somebody else will answer it, and things weren't getting answered. And so we had to make some changes to the process, because when you're working with these dogs, the clock is ticking, and you have to be able to provide answers quickly. We're super honest, we're super honest about when we can't help and what our limitations are. We let them know we're unable to provide the follow-up, ongoing training that this dog needs. We're unable to house this dog safely in the shelter. We let them know why we can't save them, what we can't do, what our limitations are, and then we encourage them to keep fighting for these dogs. I know one of the first experiences I had putting a dog on a deadline and getting bombarded all day for 3 days with phone calls of people trying to save this dog, and it just overwhelming. But at the end of it, the dog is saved, and I'd much rather be bombarded with phone calls for 3 days than nobody's fighting for this dog. So I always am encouraging, Kristen's always encouraging, we need our volunteers to step up, to say that they want to save more lives, and then help direct them what we need and how they can help get those things for us.
We're going to go now just to question and answer, because we are already 35 minutes in and we want to leave plenty of time for question and answer. So we're going to go straight to that now and take some of your questions. Thank you, Sara.
Yeah, thank you, Sara and Kristen. I'm going to start with the first question, which will provide some underlying information about PAC that I think will help with other questions and answers as well. And so the first one is, our local municipal shelter has intakes similar to PAC. I am curious how many paid staff are at PAC and the approximate annual budget. We battle being under-resourced in staffing levels and are looking to provide information to city county management showing that other shelters are showing results because there is sufficient staff to perform life-saving duties.
That's a great question. I think often about Chicago, who has an intake similar to us and a budget of about half, and how great those challenges are. We are at about 18,000 pets this year in a budget around 10 million. So we are, the county leadership here, I think because the community has said that animals have mattered, the county leadership has worked over the past decade to get that budget where it is, but not too many years ago we were where Chicago is, and so that's there's definitely some background information we can provide on that. Any questions we don't get to today or are short, we will provide more in-depth written answers to for everybody.
Thank you, Kristen. Next question. So jumping into the questions from yesterday, if you have more questions, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Do you have any advice for negative response from the community in regards to euthanasia decisions?
Yeah. So We do. I think this most often happens when we're communicating about euthanasia decisions. We're communicating with volunteers who then may go post those dogs on social media. And we get criticism for saving lives. We get criticism for ending lives. And we just expect that that's part of it. And I think we just don't react to it. We want the community to fight to save these dogs. We can't be the only ones doing it. So if people are saying they're upset about a dog being euthanized, we tell them how they can help other dogs by volunteering, by getting the training necessary to work with more challenging dogs, and number one, by fostering dogs that are at risk.
Thank you. Our next question is, how do you attract and keep volunteers?
Sara?
I think the most important thing is talking about how you need them, talking about opportunities, making the process quick, engaging people immediately as soon as they're showing interest, and then checking in with them, providing opportunities for them to provide feedback, and letting them know that they're valued. This could probably be a whole 5 more hours just of talking about volunteers.
Yeah, I think that we have a lot of critical engagement with our volunteers. Our program is far from perfect, and our volunteers would be the first to tell you that they have plenty of frustrations, but what we do maybe differently than some others is we dive right into those frustrations, and we take them, even though they're critical. And I have had as a director, there's nothing that is more stressful for me when a group of volunteers is upset, but there's usually at least a kernel of truth in what they're saying, and we try to take their feedback and input really seriously, even when it's hard to hear.
Thanks, Kristen. And some of us missed the answer in terms of how many staff and how many volunteers you have at PAC.
Oh, yeah. We have about 105 staff, and we have anywhere between 500 and 1,000 volunteers. We try to keep it closer to 1,000. And that's full-time volunteers, people giving 6 hours a month.
Thank you. Yesterday you talked about co-housing, and there are questions around whether you have space for having 2 beds in each kennel.
No. No, and the amazing ways that dogs share beds are some of our best social media fodder. They definitely figure that out. Sometimes one is laying under it, sometimes one's laying on top, but no, we have 1 bed in each kennel, and that's typically big enough to hold 1.5 dogs.
Thank you. Next question is, do you allow volunteers to foster or adopt dogs that you do not feel are safe for adoption?
No. So if we don't think that a dog is safe in the community, if we really have made that judgment, we're going to stick with that. So there are outcome options for those dogs. There's limited sanctuary placement in a few places. There are long-term rehabilitative rescues, but if we've decided a dog isn't safe, we aren't likely to place it. There are exceptions to that, and one of the things that happens occasionally is we'll get a dog that's known to be pose a danger to other pets in the home. Let's say it's a dog that has attacked 2 dogs, but it is not a flight risk. We may say we're going to euthanize this dog, and that extraordinary volunteer who has no other pets at home and who has an amazing containment plan may come forward. We don't draw lines in the sand, but generally, once we make those decisions, there's a good reason to do so. And having said that, we never really know if we're right, because once we euthanize the dog, we don't know if it ever would have caused harm again.
And I think, real briefly, I think it's important that to know there's different levels of fosters and adopters. The dog I'm going to send home with a certified trainer is not the same as the dog I'm going to send to the first-time pet owner.
All right, thank you. And I think you kind of just answered this, but the next one is, are the critical dogs that you are allowing volunteers to try to save, including dogs that you deem unsafe to adopt out due to history?
No, I don't think that we deem dogs unsafe to adopt out. It's not really how our process works. We have, and yesterday I talked about how we sort of pathway dogs differently depending on their known history. So unsafe is a big thing to us. That means that we really believe that pet is unsafe to go back into the community under any circumstances. For us, that is about 1 to 2% of the total outcomes. So the dogs that we're euthanizing for behavioral reasons, it's about 2%. Other than that, we find specific pathways for those dogs. So it really depends, and it goes back to the individual dog. Context is everything, and a dog that does something in one situation is vastly different than a dog that does a similar act in a totally different situation. Yesterday, I talked about the domestic violence situation as a not uncommon example of a dog that causes harm, but is doing exactly what we hope our dogs would do to protect us.
Great, thank you. And the next question is related to this same topic, and that's, what are your guidelines about which dogs that are going through the life-saving protocol can versus cannot be eligible for alternative placement options? So rescue, sanctuary, things like that.
There's not just they're available, they're not. Like Kristen's saying, it's really case by case and depends. I would say almost nearly any dog could go to a specific sanctuary, but not every dog could necessarily go to foster. And so it's really kind of case by case.
I think that the challenge now is that we've all been taught. I started in sheltering in '99, albeit briefly, but I've been doing this long enough to know that we've inherited a system where we're supposed to work in these black and white criteria where it's live or die. And every interaction we're having with the dog, any dog or cat, is does it live or does it die? And what we're saying is that we need to get away from we need to get rid of that whole way of thinking and move to a case management approach to say, these dogs don't have voices, they can't speak up for themselves. They have often been put in really traumatizing situations. Sometimes their behavior is totally inexcusable and we have to make hard decisions, but we need to find out as much as we can about each one. And so it doesn't really work to say this, and this means the dog dies. It's just not even how we think.
Great, thank you. Next question is, how do you support long-term foster of behavior dogs? Are you paying for dog training and or behavior modification in the foster home?
And we actually have the ability through our friends group to send some of our foster dogs to training. The biggest challenge is having fosters that will commit to going to training classes. But it's definitely an option that we have. And then we also have a volunteer focus group that just helps support pets in foster with training things. So the decompression program that Kristen talked about yesterday, as well as our Top Dog program, kind of offer opportunities for fosters to bring pets in and have some behavioral support.
And I'll also jump on to this answer in that for me at organizations and rescues that I've worked for, the behavior dogs, some of these dogs are true behavior dogs. Some of them are dealing with shelter stress and just need to get out. For dogs that I'm really concerned about their safety in the home, and I don't know whether it's because of the previous environment, whether it's a shelter or a previous person that this dog lived with, those are the dogs that are potentially high risk that I am more likely to pay for a dog trainer to foster them in their home. And that's something that we did regularly with our own rescue organization, and that either I'd foster them or someone we really, really trusted would foster them, or we'd pay a dog trainer to foster them for a short period of time where we could assess safety and then quickly move that dog to a high-level behavior foster. So they didn't stay in that paid situation for a long period of time.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more of that, Sheila, right? Where you're doing some subsidized fostering to get a better idea of what the dog is like outside of the shelter, since it's so hard to find out anything, and then having sort of this step-down system, right, where they can go to progressively more regular old homes.
Thank you. Next question, how do you define a bad bite? What makes the bite so bad that they fall into category 4 versus 3? And this is from a slide you had yesterday.
Yeah, we'll share our bite category scale. It's like a sort of modification of the Dunbar scale. And some of you may use the Dunbar scale. But when we're talking about like severe wounding incidents, a great example, we had a dog here for a rabies quarantine, a not aggressive dog here for a rabies quarantine. for a 4-month period. Our staff are rabies vaccinated. A staff member went into the kennel at night in the evening to poop scoop, and the dog just attacked her. And it was 3 deep lacerative wounds, and then the person that came to help her, the dog also attacked. So that is not a dog. I don't know what the dog's like out of the shelter. At the place we're at, that's not a dog. It's currently an owned dog, but it's not one that we would consider for placement just based on that. That kind of behavior combined with that level of injury for us, that's not a dog we're willing to take a risk on. So that's kind of an example of a situation that happened. But generally with severe bites, we're looking at the cause, and if the dog and the potential risk for the community and for safety. So one of the besides bite severity, another factor we look at is the dog's ability to escape. So even with a dog with a minor history of biting, if that's combined with the dog being a routine wall climber, that's a more serious situation. And that's kind of what I mean by looking at the set of factors versus just, it was a level 4 bite. We're looking at the set of factors that went into that incident.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. And we have a lot of really, really good questions. We're not going to be able to get to them all today. So Kristen and Sara will be answering the questions we don't get to in Maddie's pet forum. So be sure to check out the chat there. Next question, how do you encourage volunteers to share negative observations without making them feel that they are sealing the dog's fate?
I always tell them, sorry, Kristen.
No, go ahead.
I always tell them that they're helping to keep their friends and coworkers safe. That if they see something that's negative, that they're putting, their fellow volunteers and staff at risk by not letting us know. But also, we can't step in to make it better if we don't know about it.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, we're really upfront. Our volunteers are sometimes sealing the dog's fate, and that is not untrue. But like Sara said, they have a responsibility. It is made absolutely clear to our volunteers and staff that it is their obligation to report any unsafe behavior. And I think people get it. It's really hard for them, but we try to manage that stuff up front and have as many conversations as we can with folks about why it matters so much.
Thank you. Next question, when posting flyers for at-risk dogs in the neighborhoods where they were found, what kind of success are you seeing? Who is responsible for posting the flyers, staff or volunteers?
Well, we're just really dipping our toe in the water with this one, and we don't know. It could be done by either staff or volunteers. It's simply taking a flyer and stapling it up onto a pole. I know some animal control agencies are actually have stand-up signs they're sticking in the ground where the dog was found. But we don't know yet. It's too soon, and it's something we really just started. So we will stay tuned as we track data on that one.
Thank you. Next question, in what way are volunteers permitted to be present during behavioral euthanasias?
So if a volunteer approaches me and says that they would like to be present for a specific dog, I have a conversation with them to make sure that they know what they're asking to do, make sure that they're aware what the experience is like, what they might see, what it might feel like, the emotional stress on them, the emotional stress on staff. And typically, we're doing IV injection with a sedative and then the blue juice. And so we allow them to be there for that, to say goodbye. And sometimes I think it helps the staff to know that this dog has been loved and has somebody caring for it. And then there's times when we don't allow them to.
If there's a real safety risk, we may not allow them to. If a dog is a volunteer favorite, it's done something really bad, and we're going to euthanize it, we'll allow people to be there. But there's some parameters, and one of the things that we're really upfront about is that they can't make the staff member who is having to euthanize the dog feel uncomfortable, and they have to sort of keep it together while they're in the room. For the dog's sake and for the staff members. And the volunteers 100% of the time have abided by that, and we've never regretted having that policy.
Great, thank you. The next two, I'm going to do two questions at once because they're related. They're about liability. First one is, how do you get these dogs past the county attorney to alleviate his fears of being sued and a judge in the county that hates these types of dogs? Second question, how do you balance the potential liability of releasing dogs with a history? My biggest hurdle is getting our senior staff to get on board with moving past minor issues that they view as potential liability despite us having a solid contract for adopters and fosters.
My colleague, Ryan Clinton, he is an attorney. He recently wrote an article called "Can We Get Sued for That?" It's on the American Pets Live website. Everyone who works in sheltering should go read it. He talks about the importance of having a solid contract with clear indemnification language in it. And he talks about the fact that any decision you make in a shelter has to be defensible. So your conduct matters, and you have to be able to understand why you make a decision. So we make these decisions really consciously. They're not accidental, and we're able to explain those. And we also provide full disclosure in writing and verbally of everything that we know about every dog to the adopter. And you also need to make sure that you have insurance. So conduct, contract, and insurance are the three things he talks about. But the importance of tracking incidents of risk management claims, tracking incidents of lawsuits that may be happening in your community, and tracking bite data is really important. I was able at one point to show that as we decrease euthanasia, we're also decreasing bites in the community, bites in a shelter, and seeing no increase in bites of adopted dogs. That kind of information matters to leadership who do have a different bottom line than maybe someone working in the shelter.
Thank you. And next question along the same topic. Do you release dogs with a bite history with full transparency? We currently have an at-risk dog that has a bad bite from someone trying to pry something from his mouth. He's a volunteer favorite and great with dogs and people.
Yeah, I mean, if we had a dog like that, that's an explainable bite. We may look more into that, but we would, if we adopted out a dog like that, we would provide full disclosure about the incident that happened, and may even take it a step further and connect the volunteers with the adopter. So we tell people everything that we know, and we also don't add in a lot of subjective information. We're not like, we know this and we think it means this. We just tell them what we know about the dog and let them make their own decisions. And we forget that people want successful matches. They're making decisions consciously as well. And we have to respect our adopters and fosters enough to know that if we tell them everything and they decide to take a pet home and try it, number one thing we can do, make it easy for them to bring it back if it doesn't work out. It's okay for people to try a match. If it doesn't work, they can bring it back, and it's more information for us to know about that dog.
Thank you. And from Valerie, I work for a very small shelter, and it's hard to get some of these long-stay dogs out because our community sees them as problems. We have one who has been here on and off for 5 years and never her fault.
The Maddie Adult Dog Foster Apprenticeship. We run it about every other month. Go to the Maddie's Fund website and look at apprenticeships. We will spend 4 days. We will give you a stipend to come here to Tucson, and we will spend 4 days telling you how to solve that problem, and I promise you will go home, and it will help. It's not a short answer. We talked a little bit yesterday about some of the things you need to do, but typically when we hear shelters say this, we get to teach hundreds of shelters at this point, and it's really helpful because we hear this a lot. We're having trouble getting some of these more challenging dogs out. We can show you how to overcome that pretty easily through fostering, through just tweaking your marketing.
Thank you. Next question. What all do you provide to fosters? Do you require meet and greets with fosters and their animals? So what is required? What do they go home with?
Fostering a pet is no harder than adopting a pet. And we provide as much supplies as we can based on what we have available. So a lot of our foster supplies are donated or purchased through grants. And when we need things, we ask for them. And we tell our fosters, we have crates, we'll give them to you. If we have food, we'll give it to you. We provide as much as we can to them. But we also find that a lot of fosters want to buy things and then use it, as a donation or tax write-off or whatnot. But fosters, trying to understand that the shelter has limited supplies, and they help whenever they can to provide tools for fostering.
Thank you. Next question, do you find that your volunteers appreciate euthanasia notification? Do you notify them for the purpose of a last effort in finding a positive outcome or to soften the emotional aspect of the reality?
We don't. So when we notify volunteers about euthanasia, they're opting in. So they're deciding to join an email list where they're getting notification. It's if you want to know, we're going to tell you, but you don't have to know. And we do this because we don't see ourselves as separate from the community. We see us all as partners and trying to help the pets in our community. And so if they want to know when this stuff is happening, we feel like it's more humane. And that's what they've said to us. They feel like less out of control and more like they are a true partner when we tell them. And not all of our volunteers want to know. Some of them will actively try to not be in the room when we're talking about euthanasia, and that's fine too.
Thank you. How specific are you in sharing the serious information learned about a dog? Is this information on the acknowledgement form, e.g. specific circumstances around the bite, animal control field notes?
So it kind of depends on who you're asking that we share it with. So
I think they're saying the adopters, Sarah. Like, can you talk about the FNA form?
Yeah, we provide all the behavior notes we have to adopters, and we have them sign on their adoption form that they've received all of this. It's just like receiving a medical record. There's a question here too about disclosing bite photos and things like that. That information isn't given for adopters, but we do let them know sort of the circumstances and severity.
But we redact people's personal information. We give them all other information. And I know you're probably all thinking our notes sound ridiculous. Like, I remember one animal control note at one point said, "This dog is pure evil." So you get, or like, this dog's nasty, or you probably have notes. You probably have someone in your shelter entering ridiculous notes. It happens. It doesn't mean that we don't give those notes out. We can always explain what the person was saying or what they were thinking, and say we're working on our note taking, but we want to give them everything that we have. And we have a special form, which you'll get, is in the list of resources. It's called the Special Needs Adoption Form. And on that form, we actually write out the specific behaviors or history on a form while we sit with the adopter. And that's how much we all know people aren't listening when they're doing an adoption, but we actually sit and write the words out with them, and it helps make sure, absolutely sure, they understand anything that we know about the dog.
Great, thank you. And California recently passed a bill requiring disclosure, written disclosure about dog bites. So this is probably going to be coming to other states as well, or it'll be isolated in California. But it's the right thing to do in terms of ensuring safety. We have about 1 minute left. I am going to see Kristen and Sarah. Do you have any wrap up, any parting words for our attendees?
I mean, I definitely do. Sarah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I think that I have been thinking a lot on this subject, and in light of recent national conversations happening, there is not one animal-related nor human-related issue, crisis, problem that has ever been solved in my mind by killing more. We've never solved a social problem that way. If you can think of one, please email me and let me know. We have got to, as a movement, get away from this tendency to, when things get hard, go straight to killing. And we are not perfect. We are still euthanizing dogs here on a monthly basis, anywhere between 2 and 10 dogs. But we sure are trying to do things better to give more dogs a chance. And we are not going to accept that killing is the logical answer to a challenge. Instead, we want to, and we want all of you to, think about how to innovate, how to be more creative, and most of all, how to engage more of your community, because people want to help save these animals. We have to start letting them do it.
Thank you so much, Kristen. So on that note, we didn't get to all the questions, and I apologize for that, but we will be answering the rest of them on Maddie's Pet Forum. Kristen and Sarah, this was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we thank our viewers for watching. For those of you who'd like to continue today's discussion or have more questions for Kristen and Sarah, please visit the Maddie's Pet Forum webcast group. Thank you for watching and for all that you are doing to help the dogs and cats. Bye, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you.